Cilantro, coriander, Chinese parsley, whatever you call it, this innocent-looking herb may be the most hated leaf in culinary history. Why? Picture this. You've just been handed the perfect street taco, the warm tortilla, the sizzling slow-cooked beef. You take a large, confident bite, and instantly your brain hits the panic button. Because instead of a vibrant citrusy Mexican delicacy, it tastes like someone squirted neat washing up liquid directly onto your tongue. The chef isn't trying to poison you, and you haven't accidentally swallowed a dishcloth. You've just been betrayed by a leaf. The British call it coriander. The North Americans say cilantro. And both sides think the other is being needlessly difficult. Tomato, tomato, let's just call it what it's always been. Perhaps the most divisive leaf in culinary history. It turns out that the soapy horror in your mouth may not be a character flaw after all. It may be genetics, which is awkward enough. Even more awkward is this. Flavor your brain is panicking over is chemically related to the distress signal of a small and disgusting insect. Thousands of years before we started arguing about coriander on the internet, the Egyptians were obsessed with it. What did they know that we don't? And why was Tutankhamun sent into the afterlife with a jar of the stuff? If you think arguing about this plant is a new internet hobby, you're dead wrong. Our fascination with this leaf goes back to the dawn of time. Around the year 2000 BCE, the Mycenaeans were building a huge empire in Greece. One might imagine the Bronze Age was all swords, chariots, and heroic slaughter. But no, some of the earliest written records in the Eastern Mediterranean suggest that 4,000 years ago, accountants were already firmly in charge. And among the mighty accomplishments of early civilization, stock control for coriander. It was highly prized for its scent and flavour, so clearly a candidate for a profit and loss account. By 1550 BCE, the ancient Egyptians were writing about it in the Ebers Papyrus. They bypassed the kitchen and started prescribing it as a medicine. Considering the papyrus recommends rubbing crocodile dung on most of your problems, coriander seed seems reassuringly civilized. It was used to fix upset stomachs and stop pain. The seeds contain oils that block pain signals to your intestines, which physically stops the muscles in your gut from cramping up. So the Egyptians weren't entirely bonkers. And they weren't the only ones obsessed. According to the book of Exodus, when the Israelites fled Egypt, God had to handle the catering. The manna that sustained the Israelites in the desert looked exactly like coriander seeds. Apparently, the Almighty knew better than to serve the fresh leaves. When archaeologists cracked open the tomb of King Tutankhamun in 1922, they found a surprise. The boy king was buried in 1323 BCE with gold and priceless treasures, and curiously, there was also a large jar of coriander seeds. Eternal judgment was one thing, eternal indigestion apparently was quite another. But while the Egyptians treated coriander with reverence, the Greeks smelled it once and named it after a blood-sucking roommate. The ancient Greeks had a very different take on the leafy green. They didn't think it smelled like a sun-drenched citrus grove. To them, it reeked like a crushed parasite. They were absolutely right. The name coriander comes from the ancient Greek word choris, which means bedbug. When you crush the fresh leaves of the plant, they release chemicals called aliphatic aldehydes, which is science speak for why does this taco taste like fairy liquid? By a surprising coincidence of nature, bedbugs secrete those exact same aldehydes. They use them as a chemical alarm bell when they panic. Yes, you're seasoning your food with bug farts. And so coriander became known as the bedbug weed. But the nasty smell didn't stop the Romans from loving it. In the 1st century AD, the Roman writer Pliny the Elder thought of coriander as a magical cure-all. Got a nasty burn? Rub some coriander on it. Sore eyes? Coriander. Intestinal worms? You've guessed it. He even suggested putting it under your pillow to cure a fever. Apparently, Pliny missed the irony of using a plant named after bedbugs to help you sleep soundly. It's a miracle the Roman Empire survived as long as it did. And if you travelled over to ancient Persia, the medical advice got even weirder. They believed eating too much of it caused memory loss. Not only did it taste like bug spray, it also made you forget where you parked your mule. Coriander's double life of medicine and insect repellent didn't end there. It eventually led to a really peculiar wedding tradition. This plant suffers from a botanical split personality, like a garden equivalent of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. The seeds are the well-behaved Dr. Jekyll, warm, citrusy, civilized, the sort of spice one might invite to dinner. During the Middle Ages, the Italians loved these seeds so much they dipped them in hard sugar. They threw the sweet, crunchy little spheres at weddings as a symbol of luck and fertility. Because they were coriander seeds, the Italians called them coriandoli. They were known as confetti, which simply meant little sweets. Eventually, people realized that hurling hard, sugary projectiles at a newlywed couple was a bit of a hazard. They sensibly replaced the seeds with cheap coloured paper dots. The Italians logically kept calling the paper coriandoli. The English language, ever the linguistic magpie, simply nicked the word confetti instead. So the seed gave the world a harmless symbol of matrimonial joy. Meanwhile, the leafy half of the plant, the Mr. Hyde of the operation, was busy creating linguistic chaos. As the plant crossed the Atlantic, the English-speaking world lost the plot. The British, Australians and the rest of the English-speaking world stuck rigidly to calling the entire plant coriander. But in the early 1900s, North Americans adopted the Spanish word for the fresh leaves, calling them cilantro. So now the same plant has a transatlantic identity problem. Half of it is responsible for wedding celebrations, and the other half makes a taco taste like dish soap. Regardless of the name, the leaf has always had remarkably powerful enemies, starting with a 16th century doctor who was determined to wipe it off the menu entirely. During the Renaissance, Italian cooking was evolving quickly. The famous physician named Pietro Andrea Mattioli wasn't a fan of cilantro. One whiff of the fresh green leaves made him gag into his handkerchief. In the 1500s, he effectively gave it a 1-star review, warning that crushing the leaves made a smell like squashed stink bugs. That brutal medical review basically killed cilantro's Italian career. Chefs completely dropped the soapy leaves from their pans. They decided they'd rather conquer the world using basil and oregano instead. Fast forward a few hundred years to August 2002. The queen of French cooking, Julia Child, went on Larry King's chat show. When asked about food she hated, she declared war on the herb, branding it a dead taste. If someone served it to her, she said, she'd pick it out and throw it straight on the floor. The woman who taught America to cook, who personally introduced French cuisine to a nation that thought cheese came in a can, drew the line at a single leaf. So was Julia being difficult, or was her DNA simply telling the truth? It turns out Julia wasn't just being a culinary snob. Her intense hatred was actually hardwired into her DNA. In 2012, while the rest of the world was anxious about the coming Mayan apocalypse, a group of scientists was looking at why tacos taste like fairy liquid to a fifth of the population. They looked at nearly 15,000 people and found the culprit, a small receptor gene called OR6A2, which affects how your brain reads certain smells. When you chop fresh coriander, the damaged leaves release a chemical stink. Remember our old friends, the bedbugs? They give off the exact same aldehydes when they're alarmed. If you're blessed with the mutant OR6A2 gene, your nose is a smoke alarm. It makes your salsa smell like an insect infestation. In 2023, scientists figured out the exact mechanical process. Your nose doesn't just passively sniff these aldehydes, the soapy molecules physically lock onto your cells, and this bond shoots an electrical signal into your brain. So your disgust is more than a dietary preference. It's a measurable biological short circuit happening in real time. You're not being dramatic. Your brain has mistaken lunch for an emergency. Depending on where your family's from, up to 21% of people share this curse. And women are statistically more likely to have the mutation. So the next time someone tells you just to pick the leaves out, stand your ground. Tell them your facial receptors are locked in molecular combat, which raises the question, if coriander is so vile, why do many of its fiercest critics happily eat the seeds by the spoonful in a curry? So, how do the biggest haters on earth happily eat a curry packed with coriander? It's down to coriander's botanical split personality. The soap taste mutation only reacts to the fresh green leaves. When the plant produces seeds, the chemistry completely changes. The dried seeds don't contain any of those offensive aldehydes. Instead, they're packed with a chemical called linalool. What a lovely word. Linalool. A fragrant oil that smells like warm citrus and spice. And not at all like bug spray. So a person who violently gags at a fresh taco will happily devour a curry flavoured with the dried seeds. This is the contradiction of history's most hated leaf. We buried kings with it to combat flatulence in the afterlife. We coated it in sugar and chucked it at newlyweds. And we even named it after a blood-sucking insect just to be petty. You can't blame coriander. It's only a herb. And yet somehow it's spent 4,000 years starting arguments